So what really shapes the lives we actually lead? We hear a lot about the human condition, right? Those kind of core things about being human.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're really digging into today is maybe something more active.
Yeah.
Our human circumstances, this constant striving, adapting, reshaping our own existence.
Exactly. It's not just, accepting things as they are. It's that deep human drive to, well, make things better, to actively shape the world and our own place in it.
And that's really the core of this deep dive. We've looked at some fascinating sources, including things like AI, ethics, and the human condition, and the labyrinth of being.
Right.
Think of this as getting you straight to the big picture. What are the fundamental forces shaping our lives? And importantly, where does AI fit into all this complexity? Our goal today is basically to unpack that intricate web for you.
And a good starting point, I think, is getting clear on that key difference. Human circumstances versus the human condition. The condition, well, that's the inherent stuff. Birth, death, emotions, the constants. But circumstances. That's about our active pursuit of well-being. Those efforts throughout history and even now to not just endure life, but to actively improve it.
Okay, so let's explore that drive, that genesis of striving. What were some of the very first ways humans started to actively, shape their world?
Well, fundamentally, it all boils down to survival, right? Early on, humans developed these key strategies. Forming social bonds was huge, sharing resources, food, tools, that sort of thing. And then a real game changer, getting control over fire. We actually have archaeological evidence for this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like in Kagera, Kenya, going back maybe 2 million years, they found stone tools that had clearly been transported, moved over distances.
Wow, that suggests planning.
Yeah.
Cooperation.
Exactly. And then Gesher Benat Yaakov in Israel, evidence of controlled fire use around, say, 790,000 years ago. Think about what fire meant: warmth, protection, cooking, a social hub.
So it wasn't just about better tools, it was also about stronger social groups. And these two things were connected.
Precisely. They co-evolved, this kind of back and forth between better survival tech and more complex social structures. That became the primordial engine driving improvements in human circumstances.
Right.
It wasn't just individual survival anymore.
It was collective.
Yes, collective well-being, increasing the odds together.
And this desire for more than just bare survival, that changed over time too, presumably.
Absolutely. You start to see early forms of what we might call wellness concepts popping up in ancient cultures, like Ayurveda in India going back thousands of years.
3000 BC, something like that.
Yeah, around then. And traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, also with incredibly ancient roots, both emphasize balance, lifestyle, prevention, holistic approaches, really.
Which is quite different from how things developed later in, say, Greece and Rome.
It is, with figures like Hippocrates around the 5th century BCE. You see this shift away from purely supernatural explanations for illness, looking more at environment, individual factors.
More evidence-based.
Right, a move towards observation and reason, a principle that, still drives progress today, and something AI is now amplifying massively. And think about the Romans, their public health systems, aqueducts, sewers. Those were early, large-scale societal efforts to improve collective circumstances.
It's fascinating, this constant thread of trying to improve things. Psychologically, you can see echoes of this in frameworks like Maslow's hierarchy, can't you?
Oh, definitely. The initial focus on survival. That's the base of Maslow's pyramid. Physiological needs, safety.
Right.
And as societies got better at meeting those basic needs, human energy could then shift upwards towards, higher levels of well-being, connection, esteem, self-actualization, moving beyond just existing.
Okay, but even with all this striving and change, there's still some really fundamental things about being human that seem constant, universal.
Indeed. The sources talk about these universal threads and contradictory natures. We all share these core experiences: birth, death, the capacity for joy, sorrow, love, fear. These cut across culture, time, everything.
But we're also full of contradictions, aren't we?
Absolutely. That drive for self-preservation, it leads to amazing cooperation, but also, terrible conflict.
And the desire for comfort?
Drives progress, innovation, but can also lead to complacency, stagnation. These tensions seem inherent to us.
And humanity has been wrestling with these big questions forever.
For millennia. You see it in all the diverse philosophical systems, the religious traditions, Buddhism, Christianity, ancient Greek thought, Descartes. They all offer frameworks to grapple with these universals, these contradictions, trying to find meaning, purpose, ethical ways to live.
Which brings us to this really stark paradox you mentioned earlier, the universality of suffering, the universal desire for well-being, set against the incredibly different realities people face. That phrase, Gaza versus Buckingham Palace, really captures it.
It really does. Pain, loss, those might be universal feelings. But the causes of suffering, the resources available to cope, hugely different depending on your circumstances.
So this is where concepts like life chances come in.
Exactly. Max Weber's idea. The probability you have of accessing society's resources, opportunities, based on where you start.
Right.
And the WHO's framework of social determinants of health, or SDH.
Right, the conditions we live in daily.
Yeah, where you live, your education level, income, things the WHO calls the social determinants. They basically show how the circumstances of your daily life profoundly impact your health and well-being. It's not just about individual choices.
Okay, so let's try to unpack this tapestry of existence a bit more. These foundational influences shaping our circumstances. Where do we even start?
Well, maybe at the most fundamental biological level, the biological and genetic canvas. Our inheritance, our evolutionary past, our individual genetic makeup. That's a base layer.
And it's not static, right? The genome evolves.
Exactly. It's dynamic. There's an intergenerational mutation rate. Things change over time.
Though historically, the view was pretty much that genes were destiny, wasn't it? Fixed.
For a long time, yes. But advancements in molecular biology, especially gene editing tech like CRISPR-Cas9.
Like molecular scissors for DNA.
Sort of, yeah. Very precise ones. That technology is starting to fundamentally shift the perception. What seemed immutable might now be alterable.
Which naturally raises a whole host of massive ethical questions. Altering genes for future generations.
Oh, absolutely. Huge questions. The source material flags several key concerns. Respect for human DNA itself, theological objections for some, the issue of consent from people not yet born.
Right, how can they consent?
Exactly. Plus the risk of creating new social divisions or stigmas, and critically, safety concerns, off-target mutations, mosaicism, unintended consequences.
And where does AI potentially intersect with genetics?
AI could be a huge accelerant here. Analyzing massive genetic data sets, maybe predicting the effects of edits, designing interventions. It could dramatically speed up our ability to understand and maybe even modify our biology.
Okay, moving beyond biology. We exist in a physical universe, governed by laws. That's going to be another massive influence.
Absolutely. The physical universe is an arena. The laws of physics, math, logic, they basically set the rules of the game, define the boundaries of what's possible.
And our understanding of those laws has evolved incredibly over time.
Oh, massively. From early attempts to just make sense of the cosmos, through the scientific revolution, Copernicus, Galileo, Newton changing everything.
Right.
To later breakthroughs like thermodynamics driving the Industrial Revolution, or understanding electromagnetism, which underpins, well, almost all modern tech. It's a story of constantly peeling back layers.
And math isn't just abstract theory, is it? It started from practical needs.
Completely. Counting sheep, trading goods, building pyramids. Basic stuff. But it evolved into the essential language of science. Newton needed calculus to describe motion. Einstein needed tensor equations for relativity. It gives us precision.
With logic as the foundation for reasoning about it all.
Precisely. Logic underpins scientific inquiry, rational problem-solving, decision-making. It's fundamental to systematically trying to understand and improve our world.
So it seems like this cycle. Human needs drive science. The knowledge gained changes our circumstances, which creates new needs, leading to more science.
Exactly. It's this dynamic, iterative process, and AI. It's the latest major turn of that wheel, born from current needs and guaranteed to reshape our circumstances, raising new questions all over again.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Our circumstances aren't just shaped by biology and physics. Our inner world, our philosophies, they play a huge role too.
Absolutely. Philosophical frameworks are key. Existentialism, for instance, tackles those core questions head-on. Meaning, purpose, freedom, the feeling of absurdity sometimes.
Sarkre's existence precedes essence.
Yeah.
That idea that we're born blank slates, essentially, and create our own meaning.
That's a central tenet. We aren't predefined. We make ourselves through our choices, our actions. But that freedom, it comes with a heavy weight of responsibility and often anxiety.
And Camus talking about the absurd, the clash between our desire for meaning and a seemingly indifferent universe.
Yes. For Camus, meaning isn't found, it's created. Through rebellion against that absurdity, by embracing life fully, contradictions and all. Authenticity, then, is living by the values you've consciously chosen.
And this search for meaning, it's not just academic, is it? It often hits hardest during crises.
Definitely. Philosophers like Schopenhauer, Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Tolstoy, they all wrestled with this, and existentialism also talks about facticity, or our situation.
Heidegger, Sartre.
Right, the concrete realities we're thrown into, our body, history, social setting, economic status. These things constrain our choices.
But even with those constraints, existentialism insists on a fundamental freedom.
It does, even in the most extreme situations, like Viktor Frankl in the concentration camps. He argued there's always the freedom to choose your attitude, to find meaning despite the circumstances. This focus on freedom and responsibility is key to improving circumstances beyond just material stuff. It's about creating conditions where people can pursue meaning.
And AI's role in this philosophical picture.
It seems like it could go either way, doesn't it? Maybe expand our choices, automate drudgery, free us up from meaning-seeking, or create new constraints, subtle manipulations, maybe even erode that feeling of authentic freedom. It's a double-edged sword.
Our beliefs, too. Religious, spiritual, secular ideologies. They shape how we see everything.
Massively. The shaping power of belief systems and states of mind. They interpret the world, define purpose, help us make sense of suffering, establish moral codes. Think about ancient times, linking health directly to the gods' favor or anger.
And different world religions offer such different stories about the human condition, about how to improve things.
They really do. Buddhism focusing on suffering and liberation, Christianity on sin and redemption. These narratives deeply influence how people see their lives, deal with hardships, strive for better, and our states of mind, hope, despair, ambition, fear. They're both products and shapers of our circumstances.
Like chronic stress being linked to poverty.
Exactly. It goes both ways. Stress impacts health, and adverse conditions often cause chronic stress. It's a feedback loop.
Even the idea of wellness has evolved through different belief lenses.
Absolutely. Ancient yoga and TCM were tied to specific spiritual philosophies. Later Western movements, like homeopathy, they all connect health to underlying belief systems. And beliefs can be powerful forces for good driving charity, social justice movements.
But they can also hold things back.
Unfortunately, yes. If they promote fatalism or are used to justify inequality, that happens too.
So how might AI interact with these deeply embedded beliefs?
That's a really tricky one. Could AI challenge harmful beliefs with data and logic? Maybe. Or could it end up reinforcing prejudices?
Through biased algorithms or filter bubbles?
Potentially, yes. If it learns from biased data or only shows us things that confirm what we already believe, big risk there.
We've talked about these fundamental influences, but we keep coming back to the reality that the human landscape is just incredibly uneven.
It really is the uneven landscape, disparities and determinants, that Gaza versus Buckingham Palace contrast. It forces us to ask why these huge differences exist.
Bringing us back to life chances and social determinants.
Exactly. Weber's life chances, how your social position, class, gender, race, ethnicity, affects your odds, and the WHO's social determinants of health framework.
The conditions where people are born, grow, live, work, age.
Right, and the bigger systems shaping those conditions. The WHO talks about structural determinants, the socioeconomic and political context, creating inequality, and intermediary ones, the immediate daily life conditions.
And these frameworks help explain those stark differences. Gaza versus Buckingham Palace.
They do. You can see it in hard data. Infant mortality, education access, healthcare quality, environmental risks. Huge gaps depending on socioeconomic status and location. The sources lay out key factors: income, education, healthcare, geography, gender, race, policy, and how they impact people.
And these factors aren't isolated, are they? They overlap and compound.
Precisely. They intersect. Think intersectional stigma, multiple disadvantages piling up. It creates cycles of privilege for some, disadvantage for others. So tackling disparities means tackling the whole interconnected system.
You can't just fix one thing.
Right. And crucially, any AI solutions have to be designed knowing about these compounding effects, or they could easily make things worse.
It's also fascinating to think about the mix of accident and design in all this.
Yeah.
How much is chance? How much is choice or structure?
That's a deep philosophical rabbit hole. Free will versus determinism. Are choices real or just the unfolding of prior causes?
Hard determinism versus free will theories. Or compatibilism trying to bridge the gap.
Exactly. And then there's just pure chance. Random mutations driving evolution, unexpected historical events, even physics debates about randomness versus determinism at the quantum level, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, chaos theory.
So a lot of what feels accidental comes from that mix. Lottery of birth,
Yeah.
Random events, complex systems interacting.
I think so. It arises from the sheer complexity, nonlinear interactions. Think complex adaptive systems, CAS. But we also design things. We make individual choices. We build social, political, economic systems deliberately.
Even if the outcomes are unpredictable.
Often unpredictable, yes. So the perception of accident comes from that massive complexity. It's just incredibly hard to predict outcomes precisely. And now AI is another agent thrown into that complex mix.
Which leads us, maybe uncomfortably, to beneficiaries and burdens. Who gains most from how things are, and who bears the costs?
The data paints a pretty clear picture. The World Inequality Report 2022, for instance, shows a huge concentration of wealth and income globally.
The top 10% having most of the wealth?
Capturing 52% of income, owning 76% of wealth, according to that report, while the poorest 50% get about 8.5% of income and own just 2% of wealth. Stark numbers.
And public wealth declining while billionaire fortunes surged.
Yeah, especially after the 2008 crisis and during the pandemic, that trend is noted.
And the consequences of this extreme inequality are widespread.
Very much so. Environmental damage wealth often fuels destructive industries while conservation is underfunded, undermining democracy, disproportionate political influence, social instability, lack of mobility, persistence of extreme poverty, nearly 700 million people, educational gaps. Poverty is a huge barrier there.
So the beneficiaries tend to be those already privileged, while the burdens fall on the marginalized?
Largely, yes. And there's often a feedback loop. Wealth concentration leads to political influence, shaping policies that reinforce the inequality, potentially eroding public wealth further. Addressing it means tackling resource distribution and power imbalances. And AI, we have to ask if it will help or hinder that.
Beyond the material, there's the psychological weight of all this inequality.
Absolutely. There's a really strong link going both ways between poverty and mental health issues.
Chronic stress, stigma, trauma.
Reduced sense of control all contribute to higher rates of disorders in poorer communities. And childhood poverty can have lasting effects. Plus, accessing mental health care is often much harder.
What about the other end? Extreme wealth. Does that have psychological impact?
It's less studied, but yes, potentially. Social isolation, maybe a lack of purpose, difficulty with authentic relationships, anxiety about managing the wealth. Some call it affluenza, informally.
So both extremes can erode agency and connection.
It seems possible. Both poverty and, perhaps in different ways, extreme wealth can impact your sense of control and the quality of your social ties. Improving circumstances psychologically means fostering agency, connection, meaning across the board. AI's role here, very complex.
Which brings us squarely to the ethical dimensions, shaping and experiencing circumstances. It's loaded with ethics.
Definitely. The drive for improvement through science and tech has brought huge benefits, no question. Health, literacy, comfort, massive progress.
But unevenly spread, and with costs.
Often unforeseen costs. Altering the order of life, it involves those complex adaptive systems again. Feedback loops, nonlinear effects. Often, the benefits are immediate and clear, while the costs are delayed, diffuse. Think climate change, biodiversity loss, social atomization from tech, privacy erosion.
Raising huge ethical dilemmas, present benefits versus future harms, fair distribution, responsibility for unintended consequences.
Exactly. And with AI's power, a proactive, systemic, deeply ethical approach isn't just nice to have, it's absolutely essential.
And within that, specific moral quandaries. Responsibility, justice, the ethics of intervention.
Right. Existentialism stresses individual responsibility, but AI complicates that, doesn't it? Biased algorithms, autonomous decisions. Who is responsible when an AI causes harm?
The coder, the company, the user.
Tough questions. And intergenerational responsibility with things like germline editing. Then justice. How do we distribute resources fairly? Egalitarianism, meritocracy. Rawls' justice is fairness, equal liberties, helping the least advantaged.
Versus Nozick's entitlement theory, individual rights, just acquisition.
Different perspectives highlight the difficulty, especially globally. And interventions like germline editing raise fears of commodification, worsening inequality, echoes of eugenics, altering the human gene pool itself. Principles like respect for persons, beneficence, justice from the Belmont Report offer guidance.
But there's this gap, right? Technology races ahead, ethics and governance lag behind.
A widening gap. AI and biotech are moving incredibly fast. Ethical reflection, regulation, much slower. This capability consensus gap is risky. We need inclusive public dialogue, adaptive governance, urgently.
We also need to talk about the enigma of suffering, its role, how we see it, that urge to seize the pain, as the source puts it.
It's fascinating how cultures view it differently. Western cultures often focus on eliminating suffering. Eastern philosophies, like Buddhism's dukkha, see it more as inherent, something to understand and work with. Existentialists, too, sometimes see it as necessary for growth. Indigenous views vary widely as well.
Is there value in suffering? Can it teach wisdom, resilience, compassion?
Some argue yes. Think of Kenshin Rinpoche, Helen Keller, Viktor Frankl. Finding meaning through adversity, it creates this tension. We want to alleviate suffering, rightly so, but could we, in striving for constant comfort, diminish opportunities for developing crucial human strengths?
So a nuanced approach is needed. Mitigate destructive suffering, but allow for growth through challenges.
Perhaps. We need caution about chasing constant ease. But then, who decides what's good suffering versus bad, and how do we apply that to AI interventions, more ethical knots?
And the ultimate question, mortality and meaning. Do circumstances matter after we die?
Well, that depends entirely on your worldview, doesn't it? Religious or spiritual beliefs often posit an afterlife, karma, judgment, where earthly life definitely matters for what comes next.
Whereas secular views, like existentialism,
Tend to focus meaning-making within this finite life, which arguably makes our circumstances here and now even more important. The human drive for longer life, our condemnation of those who cause harm. It suggests we deeply value this existence.
So redundancy after death is belief-dependent. From a materialist view, consciousness ends, but legacy remains.
Right, the impact you had, the memories, they persist. Mortality is paradoxical. It makes achievement seem fleeting, but also gives life urgency and significance. And AI touches this everywhere, life extension tech, potentially reinforcing secular views. But ultimately, life, death, meaning these are deeply personal, cultural things.
Okay, this sets the stage perfectly for looking at artificial intelligence, a new lens on human circumstances.
Exactly. AI gives us this powerful new way to think about and maybe influence all these forces we've been discussing. Fundamentally, AI models are programs trained on data to spot patterns and make decisions.
And their power comes from scale, analyzing data beyond human limits.
That's a big part of it, processing vast data sets, finding subtle correlations humans might miss. And they learn in different ways, supervised learning from labeled examples, unsupervised finding structure in raw data, reinforcement learning through trial and error, rewards and penalties.
We should see AI not in isolation, but as part of our socio-technical systems.
Definitely. It's a component within those complex adaptive systems we talked about. It can model social systems, predict trajectories based on data, act like a computational ethnographer, revealing hidden patterns.
But with crucial limits to its understanding.
Absolute critical point. Its understanding is based purely on data and algorithms. It lacks real-world context, cultural nuance, historical depth, subjective experience, genuine human understanding.
So we can't just rely on AI's view. We need human interpretation, philosophy.
We absolutely must. Over-reliance risks missing crucial, unquantifiable aspects of human dignity and meaning.
We're already seeing significant current AI impact, though. Augmenting decisions, allocating resources.
Shaping social interactions, yes.
Yeah.
Recommendations, healthcare diagnostics, inputs in judicial systems, governance tools, often aiming for efficiency, objectivity.
But loaded with risks, bias.
A huge one. If the training data is biased, the AI learns the bias. Privacy invasion is another major concern. Lack of transparency, the black box problem, discrimination potential, how AI subtly shapes our behavior, issues of trust and fairness.
It's creating what some call algorithmic circumstances, a new layer shaping our lives.
I think that's a useful concept. A layer often lacking transparency, leading to feelings of powerlessness. We need more transparency, explainability, accountability, better algorithmic literacy for everyone.
What about the AI promise? Can it deliver enhanced well-being, maybe even constant contentment?
The potential is definitely there in many areas. Personal health wearables, faster drug discovery, robotic surgery, climate modeling, optimizing transport, improving agriculture. AI could certainly improve material conditions, quality of life.
Constant contentment.
Psychology suggests caution. The hedonic treadmill or hedonic adaptation, we tend to get used to improvements. Our happiness baseline doesn't shift permanently just from external changes.
Plus ethical concerns about manipulation, authentic happiness.
Right. And remember our discussion about suffering. Maybe a life without challenge lacks meaning. Perhaps AI's best role isn't engineering contentment, but empowering individuals.
Helping us flourish, navigate challenges, find meaning.
Exactly, supporting human potential rather than programming happiness.
Could AI offer genuinely new logics, new ways to understand life, ethics, suffering, mortality?
That's highly speculative, but interesting. Imagine an AI driven purely by, say, maximizing human life preservation without human emotions.
How might it approach things?
Maybe radically advocating for life extension, challenging concepts like a right to die, launching data-driven campaigns on the value of life. It would operate from a logic different from our current human-centered ethics.
But could its logic be better? Isn't better a human value judgment?
Precisely. AI's logic is data-driven, but whether its conclusions are better depends on our values. The source material outlines potential AI applications, healthcare, resource allocation, environment, education, even philosophical support listing benefits and ethical considerations for each. There's a risk of algorithmic paternalism, too, AI optimizing for its definition of well-being over our autonomy.
Which demands human oversight, safeguards, value alignment.
Non-negotiable. Constant societal dialogue is needed.
All of which underlines the imperative of ethical AI.
Absolutely fundamental. If AI is to be a positive force, ethics and governance are paramount. Core principles like human well-being, human oversight, addressing bias, transparency, safety, sustainability, privacy, responsibility, accountability.
But implementing them is hard. Assigning responsibility for harm, global development versus exploitation, fair benefit sharing, misuse potential, environmental costs.
Huge challenges. Governance needs to be adaptive, involve entire value chains, consider diverse impacts globally. Ethical commitment has to be foundational.
So, looking ahead, navigating the future towards improved and equitable human circumstances. How do we get there?
First, addressing systemic divides. Tackling inequality at its roots. Policies for fair wealth distribution, progressive taxes maybe. Universal quality education. Universal comprehensive healthcare, including mental health. Robust social safety nets.
And targeting intersectional disadvantage.
Yes, with specific policies. Thinking about Rawls' ideas of fairness. Reevaluating public spending, shifting from harmful subsidies to public goods. It needs coordinated, sustained effort across sectors, government, private, civil society, international bodies.
Global problems need global cooperation, especially for AI governance.
Essential. A holistic, systems-thinking approach is needed. AI might help model the complexity, but it must be guided by equity and justice.
We also need synergies for progress, bringing different fields together.
Exactly. Science and tech give us tools and understanding. Philosophy provides ethical compasses, values. Policy translates it all into action. We need constant dialogue between them.
So philosophy and ethics as the helmsman, guiding the engine of tech, especially AI.
That's a good way to put it. Investing in ethical reflection, public deliberation is as vital as the R&D itself.
What about specific frameworks for responsible innovation and intervention?
Operationalizing ethics principles within organizations, ethics committees, clear policies, developing risk-based regulations for AI, especially high-impact areas, a safety mindset, prioritizing human rights in design and deployment. For things like germline editing, strict safeguards, broad societal consensus are crucial. We need anticipatory governance foresight, scenario planning, adaptive rules for rapid change, and inclusive dialogue to co-create norms, maybe leaning precautionary for powerful AI.
And finally, how do we cultivate inner strengths in this dynamic world?
By cultivating resilience, meaning, and well-being. Recognizing challenges aren't all bad. They can build resilience, empathy. Focus on reducing unjust suffering while empowering people to navigate difficulties constructively.
Supporting the search for meaning, promoting mental health.
Yes, through access to support, inclusive communities, and fostering adaptability, lifelong learning, including those fusion skills for working with AI. Enduring well-being comes from within purpose, agency, relationships, meaning.
So AI's best role is maybe empowering that, not directing it.
I think so. Equipping people with wisdom, resources, support to navigate their own human circumstances.
It's just so clear how incredibly complex human circumstances are, this constant dance of factors.
It really is. Biology, physics, philosophy, beliefs, societal structures, inequality, a vast ongoing story.
And AI is this major new element, a lens and a tool with huge potential and significant risks.
Absolutely, which makes ethical development and deployment absolutely crucial. Maximize benefits, mitigate harms.
It really demands that synergistic approach. Science, tech, philosophy, policy, all working together thoughtfully.
Couldn't agree more. And maybe something for you, the listener, to reflect on. This essential balance we need to strike between striving for external improvements, better conditions, more equity, and cultivating our own internal resilience, our own sense of purpose. In this age of accelerating change, What's our responsibility, individually and collectively, in defining what a meaningful human life looks like?
A lot to chew on there. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.
This is DigitView.